So today let us just start with pivot tables. I guess most of you have attended my basic sessions and you have understood what Excel basics is, right? What is the basic of Excel? What is a cell? What is a name box? What is a formula bar? Everything. So today we'll just see pivot tables. So the first thing we need to know here, okay, first thing what we need to know here is what is a pivot table? A pivot table is a data analysis tool or a summarization tool which helps us summarize the data and create reports in Excel. Okay. So if you want to create reports in Excel, we generally do it with a pivot table. Okay. So pivot table is, see, the meaning of pivoting itself, it means that cutting short the data or summarizing the data in a way that we get an eagle eye view of the actual data. Okay. So a pivot table actually connects to the table and then or table of data or any data, and then it actually pulls out the summaries from that particular table. Okay. So here if you see on the screen, there is an Excel table. Okay, first let us just learn what is an Excel table. I'll just move all these pivot tables to the side. Okay, yes. So let's just see what is an Excel table. Okay. See, there are two tables on the screen right now. Both look similar. Okay, both are exactly similar in all the ways. Okay, other than the values, because I have put a formula here. But this is an Excel table and this is just a normal collection of cells. Okay, how am I saying that? How to identify an Excel table is, see, first thing is when you're keeping the cursor on the Excel table, you can see there is a special tab that is appearing on the ribbon. Okay, so when a special tab appears for any tool in Excel, it means it is a special tool in Excel. Okay, for all the special tools in Excel, this particular special tab appears in the ribbon. So a table will have a table design tab which will have unique properties which can be edited only for a table. Okay. And over and above that, Excel tables are very much beneficial in the sense that they maintain data consistency. If suppose I am entering any formula here, for example, I am entering the same formula, whatever formula I have entered here, I am entering formula here. Okay. Let me just enter the formula here. I'm pressing enter. If you see, this particular formula is only applied to one particular row here, and if I have to apply the formula to all the other cells, what I have to do, I have to drag it down. Correct. But in an Excel table, even though it's a formula, and if I apply the formula only to the first row or any row in this particular whole table, the formula will automatically be applied to all the rows in this particular data. Okay, so it maintains consistency throughout the data. Excel table mainly maintains consistency throughout the data. And there is one more advantage to Excel table, that is, see, suppose I'm putting a formula. For example, we all would have known, or whoever are new, most probably what we do is we actually refer to ranges like this. Okay, for example, if I have to refer to a range like this, I'm just referring to this particular range and I'm bringing the date. Okay, let me not bring the date. Let me bring the sales value here. Okay, so just bringing the whole row here, and this is actually called as in spill array. As we go forward, we'll learn what is a spill array also, so that is not an issue. Okay, now in the same way, I'm doing the same formula for the table also. Okay, so the first thing you can see is a table formula here. It is not being referred as A1 to A2 or A1 to A100, not like that. It is actually a named range because I have given a name to the table. It is showing as a named range. That is, it is saying from this particular table, I am taking the sales column. Okay, based on the column name. Now, first thing, this is one of the advantage. And the second advantage here is, see, as soon as I added both the rows, you can see both have come up till here, correct? So I can actually change this also properly to that particular line so that it will be properly visible. I'm just changing both to the equal length here. So only up to this point of data I'm taking in both the tables. Okay. Now what I'm doing here is I'm adding an extra row in a table. For example, I'm adding one more row in a table. So in this particular case, you see this formula auto-updated and extended to the next row. But this formula, whichever was dependent on the just collection of cells, it was an X table. It did not auto-update. So this seems like a very small thing, but what happens is whenever you are using large set of data, you cannot keep check if your ranges are properly defined. Okay, so always I suggest you, if the data is like within 1 lakh rows or 2 lakh rows, always use Excel table. Why I'm saying 1 lakh or 2 lakh is you can always use Excel table for any number of rows. But the thing is, as the data gets more and more, the Excel table will become heavier on the Excel file and your Excel file will keep getting hanged. Okay. So this is one of the advantages here. It auto, any formula you put on an Excel table will auto extend itself, and a formula put on a range. See, why I am saying this is a normal range. This particular range is defined as J2 to J63. It's not defined as anything else. It is saying that from J2 to J63 cell I have selected. Okay, so this is what is a normal range, and this is an Excel table. A reference to the Excel table. Okay. So now we have understood what is an Excel table and what are the advantages of Excel table. One more thing what we can do is, next let us just go to the creating a pivot table. To those of us who are very new to Excel, see what we can do is we can just keep the cursor on the data. See, pivot tables are always created based on a data, correct? So first thing is we have to keep the cursor on the data before inserting a pivot table so that the data gets selected. I can select the whole data also by pressing Control and A as a shortcut. I can press Control and A as a shortcut and still select the whole table, or I can just keep a cursor here and okay, let me just remove this blank row. This is not required. So what I can do is I can just keep the cursor anywhere on the table, and I can just go to the Insert tab here, go to Pivot Tables, inserting a pivot table, and if you see this particular range is selected. A range is nothing but this is a table. A table is named as TB. The table that I have created here is named as TB. So that is why it is automatically selected when I have just kept the cursor somewhere here, and I have to insert this particular pivot table in an existing sheet. I can insert it into a new sheet also. It will create a new sheet and then enter a pivot table. For now, because I want the pivot table to be beside here the table, what I'll do is, okay, this I'll just select the table again, and in this particular location I want the pivot table to be placed here, so I'm just selecting that particular cell and so once the pivot table is inserted, you can automatically see there is a, on the right hand side there is a box that is automatically popped up. So this is actually called as a pivot field box. Okay, so anything that we do in a pivot table will always involve this particular box or a menu that is actually called as pivot table fields. Over and above that, okay, let us just go one by one. You can see here what is the correlation between a pivot table and a table here. Okay, so if you see here what is happening, all the columns are being listed here. Okay, so the date, region, product, sales, and quantity columns are being listed here. So why they are being listed here? To manipulate the data. See, a table of data is nothing but rows and columns, correct? A column, if it is correctly defined, that means we can actually manipulate the data very nicely in a pivot table. So always you need to remember all the columns before creating a pivot table. All the columns in a table, in a set of data, should have proper column names. Okay. Without a column name, a pivot table will not be formed. It will give you an error. Okay. So now, since I want, now I have the data and I have created a pivot table. Let me just explain these boxes here. So these boxes are what will help us create a pivot table. Okay, these boxes are what will help us create a pivot table. Since Excel is very user friendly, everything here is just drag and drop. Okay. So what will happen in each and every boxes? If suppose I place any field here from this particular section, if I place any field in the filter box, that particular pivot table will be filtered based on whatever filters we are applying. Okay, so to filter anything, you can directly drag and drop this particular field into the filter box. And if I drag and drop anything into the, let me just show you also. If I'm dragging and dropping the region here into the filter box, see, no filter is applied to the pivot table. Even though there is no pivot table here, the filter is applied over and above which the pivot table will be built. Okay. Now I'm just dragging and dropping the region in the column box. When I'm doing that, all the regions are appearing as columns here. You can see all the regions are appearing as columns. And why each and every region is appearing only once? See, here east can be more than once. See, here itself there are two east, three, four, five. So there are many east in this particular data, but here it is appearing only once. Why it is because a pivot table will always summarize the data. Okay, no matter what you put into a pivot table, it will be automatically summarized. Okay, why it is summarizing it is because pivot table is used to create reports, and we always create summaries with a pivot table. We don't want to see the exact data again. Okay, a pivot table will always summarize the data by default. And over and above this, if I'm dragging and dropping the region into the rows box, the region will appear in the rows. Okay. By now you would have understood these are columns and these are rows, right? So just very basic thing, any column or any field you are putting into a column box, it will be shown into columns. Any field you are putting into a rows box, it will be shown into the rows. Okay. And this is a very special box in a pivot table, which means that whatever you put into this particular box, it will be calculated. Okay, whatever is put into this box will be calculated. So even if I put a region also, can region be calculated? See, these are not numbers. East, west, north, south are not numbers. But even though I am putting a region in values box, it will be calculated. So whatever calculations are possible, those calculations will be performed automatically in a pivot table. So now what it is doing is number of times regions are there in the data. It is just counting that particular number of times. So it is just saying that regions are there 62 times in this particular data, all the regions combined. Okay, so this is a value box which will automatically calculate all the columns that you put into it. Any column you put into it, it will be calculated. It will not show you the normal data. Okay, now when I'm placing the region box back to the rows, and now I want to see region wise sales. Why do I want to see region wise sales? If I am a CEO of a company, I can sit and analyze the data saying that, okay, in this region, if the sales is high, I can increase the sales here, or anything in that particular point of view. I can actually make decisions based on the analysis. Okay. So now what I'll do is I'll just drag and drop the sales here in this particular value box. When I'm doing that, you can see automatically certain calculations are performed on sales. See, sales is already a value. Over and above that, there are certain calculations performed. That means if you see here, the sum of sales is performed. For example, East has many sales. Okay, East has many sales, but here it is being summarized into one, saying that in the whole East region, we have 1,18,948 as a sales. Okay, so this is the total sales in the East region. Now, if you see in this particular thing, if I see, I can just find out which region has the highest sales. North region has the highest sales, and I can find out that West region has the lowest sales. As simple as that. Okay. Now, over and above this, if I want to see a region wise and a product wise analysis, for example, here now I have region wise sales. I want the product also. I want to see which product is being sold where. Okay. So what I can do is I can drag the product into the column box. When I do that, you can see region wise and product wise sales is being displayed here. Okay. So here, if you see in the East region, product A has been sold so much, product B has been sold so much. So if you see here in the East region, the lowest sales is for the product B. So here I can just take a decision saying that I can stop selling product B in East region in, like, because I would be incurring certain fixed costs, right? If those fixed costs are not covered, then there is just a loss for me in that particular region. So I can just withdraw the sales for B product in that particular region. Okay. So such kind of analysis. So these are just examples. Such kind of analysis can be performed in a pivot table. Okay. So now I have seen product wise and region wise sales. Okay. Now let us just see this value box in a little bit detailed form. If suppose I want to do some other calculation, see right now by default all the summaries are summed here. Okay, anything you put into a value box which is a value already or a number already, it will be summed by default. Okay, so if I want to change the calculation, if I want to perform any other calculations on the values, I have to click on this particular arrow mark and I'll go to the value field setting here, and then you can see there are various other calculations available for me which I can perform in based on which the summaries can be formed in the pivot table. Okay, now if you see here I have count, average, min, max. Okay, all these are based on which the first level of calculation will be performed in a pivot table. Over and above which, if suppose I want to do the sum of the calculation, like I want to do calculation based on sum only, and over and above that I want to find the percentage of sales. Okay, here the values are being shown. If I have to find out the percentage of sales, I can just go to this particular show values as tab, which has much more advanced calculations for a pivot table. Okay, over and above the sum it will perform some other calculations. Okay, so let me just show you one or two examples here. For example, if I'm saying percentage of grand total here and I'm saying okay. So what is happening here is, see, now the total sales, the total sales from the full data is being summarized as 100 percentage, and over and above which each and every sales in each and every region and product is being divided based on this particular 100 percentage. So what it means is product A is constitutes of 22.63 percentage of sales as compared to the total sales of 100 percentage here. Okay, so in the east region there is total sales of 23.96 percentage as compared to the 100 percentage sales. That means 100 percentage sales is nothing but the total sales that has been done up till now, the whole data set. Okay, so this is an advanced calculation which is there in a pivot table. If suppose I want to perform any other calculation, I can always go ahead and select. So for example, if I want to do a column total, percentage of column total. So here, what is happening here is, see, each and every product is being considered as 100% sales. And now this particular product, if suppose the sales of product A is 100 percentage, in each and every region, what is the proportion of sales of A? That is what is being shown here. Okay. So A is sold 44.60% in East. That means highest sales is there in West. Okay, these are the two highest sales, and these are the two least sales for the product A as percentage, as per the percentage calculated in a pivot table. Okay, so there are many other advanced calculations in a pivot table in this particular tab. If you just go through one by one, you will understand what it does. You can perform differences of percentage from, you can rank it from largest to highest, and there are many other advanced calculations, and these calculations are performed over and above the summarization here. So first basis will be this summarization, which you can select any kind of calculation. Over and above that, you can perform other calculations on a data set. Okay, so now we have seen in detail the value box in a pivot table. So this is a very special box which will help us calculate values and summarize values in a pivot table. Okay, now let us just go to the now I have region wise and product wise sales. For example, I want year wise and quarter wise sales. If I want to manipulate the date in a pivot table, so what I can do is, first let me just remove the unnecessary columns from these boxes. I'll place the date column in the row box. Okay, see, I'm not doing anything. Automatically, a new column is being formed by the pivot table itself. So generally, this will be the depiction of date. Okay, so now this is a date-wise sales in a pivot table. This is not a summarization still. Okay, I have the same thing in the data. I don't want to see the same thing in the pivot table. What I want to see is, I want to see the year-wise and quarter-wise sales. So what I'll do, I'll just right click on this particular thing. I'll go to the grouping options, and in the grouping, if you see, there are certain groups that I can actually group the date into. Okay, so if I group the date into years, I can see the year wise sales here. Okay, I can see the year wise sales. Over and above which, if I want, I can group it in quarters also. So wherever it is highlighted as blue, it means that is selected. So over and above years, I am selecting it as quarters also. So it will group year wise and quarter wise sales it will show. So now if you see year wise, that is 2024, and in each year what are quarter wise sales here. The summaries are being shown. So this is how we actually manipulate the dates in the pivot table. Over and above which we can actually create month-wise sales also. For example, if I want instead of quarter-wise, I want month-wise sales, I can select that particular thing also. So in each every year, each and every month, what is the sales amount that is being shown in a pivot table? Okay. Now, this is what is how we use dates in a pivot table. Okay, this is how we group the dates in a pivot table. And if I want to ungroup it, I can just go directly and ungroup it so that all the groupings will be removed and normal dates will be inserted. But for now, let us have year-wise and quarter-wise sales just for better upload. Okay. Now, there is one more thing that you need to know in a pivot table concept. See, when we are using a pivot table, what it does is it is just creating a connection to the data. Okay, the data is not being directly accessed by a pivot table. A pivot table is creating a connection to the data. So, when a connection is created, what it means is a pivot table has to keep on getting refreshed. Why it has? See, I have put this random ran between formula purposefully in this particular table because for each and everything that I do in Excel, these data will get keep on refreshing automatically. Okay, a rand between formula will keep on generating random numbers automatically in Excel. So if you see this particular total here, the total of yeah, so the total of this table is never equal to this particular pivot table. So that means our pivot table can go wrong if we don't see this. I will now change this to static data. Okay, I'll just copy this and paste it as values. Now this values will not change because I have fixed it as values instead of formulas. Okay. Now if you see there is a change in data, you can see the total is 4,86,532 here. But here the data is 4,96,358. So what I'll do is I'll just bring the total here so that insert difference here. Now, if you see these two totals are not matching, since this pivot table is created over and above this data only, the data has to match here all right. Otherwise, whatever analysis you are doing is wrong. So, if there's any updations to the data, you have to always refresh a pivot table. A refresh can be done in two ways. First thing is I can right click on pivot table here and click refresh here so that see both the data are aligned, or I can go to the data tab and press refresh all so that the pivot table is refreshed automatically. And when I'm pressing refresh all here, it does not only refresh this pivot table, it will refresh all the pivot tables that are there in this particular workbook. Okay. There are many pivot tables that are there in this book, and all the pivot tables will be refreshed automatically in this particular workbook. Okay. So this refresh will refresh only this particular pivot table, but refresh all will refresh all the pivot tables that are there in this particular Excel file or a workbook. Okay, so this is one of the very crucial concepts that you need to know. Without refreshing, never use any pivot table if you're not sure if data has changed or not. Okay, if the data has changed, you have to use a refresh option. Otherwise, your data or your analysis in a pivot table will go wrong because it would have not synced up to the data. Okay. Now, let us just see certain design options in a pivot table. For example, pivot, we use pivot tables for reporting purposes also, correct? So when we are using it for reporting purposes, it has to look good if we are going to present it to someone, correct? So in that case, I can customize certain design options in a pivot table. So if I come to this particular design tab in a pivot table, see these two tabs are special tabs because these are green colored tabs. Okay, so as I told you, each and every special Excel tool will have a special tab for itself. Okay. So if it has a special tab, you can understand that this is an Excel special tool. Okay. Now the pivot table has a design tab. I can just go to the subtotals here. What are subtotals? These subtotals are nothing but group totals. So if I remove the subtotals, you can see here now for 2024, for each and every year, there is a subtotal also appearing over and above which quarter-wise totals are also appearing, right? So subtotals are nothing but these are the subtotals, the group totals that are there. So if I am saying do not show subtotals, see all the totals for the year are removed. Okay. So I can customize based on my requirement just to make the report look much better. Okay. And over and above which I can remove or add grand totals also. See, grand totals are nothing but these are grand totals. These are grand totals on the rows, and these the grand totals on the columns also appear here. Okay. If I place the quarters here, you will be able to see grand total on the columns also and rows also. Okay. So I can customize switch on and off these also from these options. Over and above which, if you see here, I can change the layout of the report. Okay. If suppose my report is like this, okay, quarter wise, it is right now in a step down approach. For example, under 2024 there are 4 quarters, so 4 quarters are listed under 2024, but this might not look okay for me, or if it looks clumsy for me, what I can do is I can go to the report layout. See, right now the pivot table by default is in a compact form. Okay, so we can just show it in an outline form where it looks much better. Now it is again in a step down approach only, but it has been split into a separate columns. Okay, year is in separate column, quarters is in separate column. Over and above which, if I want to do much more better things, I can just show it in a tabular form also. So in a tabular form, now it is not in a step form, but it is in a same row, but this is being only shown once. Okay, this particular label is being only shown once. But if I want to, what happens is year 24 is from here to here, correct? So if I want to repeat all these labels, what I can do, I can just go to the report layout and I can select this option where it will all the 24 all the quarters coming under year 24 will be labeled as 2024, again 2025, 2026. Okay. So these are certain design options, and over and above which I can actually add a blank row in a pivot table also. For example, if I'm adding blank row here, what will happen here? Automatically, these see after each and every group, a blank row is added in a pivot table. It helps us make the report look much better. Okay. Now, if you see, there are other design options here, which I can select the coloring options or color scales, which I can select based on my requirement. So whatever suits my requirements, I can just select those color scales to make the pivot table look much better. So these are some of the design options. Now, I have one more thing to tell you. So, for example, if in a pivot table, if your boss is asking you that he wants each and every year in a separate sheet in a pivot table, okay. So, this is a little bit of an advanced option. What we do generally is we go and create the sheets like manually here, and then we will copy paste the pivot table, correct? But we shouldn't do that. Why is because, see, right now in this particular sheet I'll not be able to do it. So what I'll do, I'll create a new Excel sheet to show you guys. I'll just copy the same pivot table here. Okay. Now I want to do the same thing. I want to create sheet based on the years. Okay, year wise sheet I want. So what I can do is, whatever based on whatever things I want the sheet to be divided, I'll place that particular, since I want it based on years, I'll place that particular field in a filter box here. Okay. Once I have placed in the filter box, I can go to pivot table analyze tab here. And in the options, I have an option called show filter pages. Okay. So in this particular option, see, whatever is placed in this particular filter box only will be displayed here. So what I can do is I can select this option. So now if you see, automatically sheets for each and every year is created for me. I am not creating it manually. See, generally what we do, we will, in such cases, what we will do, will, even if there are thousands of pages to be created, we will sit and do it manually, wasting our time. But we can actually do it very easily in a pivot table. If you are able to bring the data into a pivot table in any form that is required for you, you can always create such things automatically. Okay, instantly it will be created. Even if there are thousands of pages, a pivot table will be created for you in each and every sheet separately for each and every year. Okay, so this is one of the advanced options you guys need to know. And over and above this, see, there is a concept of dashboarding. Okay, so when we use dashboards, what it means is we use interactive elements rather than we don't go and enter data or anything, correct? So here, if I have to filter something from this particular pivot table, instead of me placing it in the filter box, I have an advanced tool which will help me. So this particular tool can be used only on an Excel table, and a pivot table. Okay, so I can just go to the pivot table analyze tab and see there is something called as insert slicer. So when I'm inserting a slicer, it is asking me based on which field I want to filter the pivot table. So based on the region field, for example, if I want to filter based on the region field and the product field, I'll just select both and I'll just say okay here. Now if you see two visual elements are inserted onto the screen, correct? Now whatever I want to filter, I can just directly click on this element and filter. So now only the east region sales is showing year wise and quarter wise. North region sales, south region sales, west region sales, whatever it is. And over and above which I can select east region, and in east region, if I want to see only B, I can select B also here. Okay. And if I want to clear any filter, I can just go here and clear the filter from each and every slicer separately here. And if I want to select multiple items in a slicer, what I can do is I can hold down the control button and I can keep on selecting any number of filters I want. And if I leave the control button, now this particular sales is only for east, north and south. Okay, as simple as that, east, north and south. I can do multiple selections. How? I can just hold down the control button and I can keep on selecting the uh, data that I want. Okay, so this is how a slicer works in a pivot table. A slicer is used to what? It is an alternative to filtering manually. See, I can do the same thing by placing the region here in the filter box, and I can just go here and filter out manually each and every time. But this is too much of work for me because each and every time I have to go into this, I have to tick this, correct? What I can do is I can use a slicer to directly interact with the pivot table here. And this slicer can be inserted only on a pivot table or on an Excel table. On a normal range, a slicer cannot be inserted. Okay. Now, this is a slicer for any normal data. There is one more slicer that is specific for date. Okay. So, for example, if I want to filter out the dates, okay, there is something called as timeline filters. Okay. So, when I'm inserting a timeline filter, you can see automatically only the date column is shown here. Other columns are automatically hidden because this can be applied only on a date. Okay. So, I'm just selecting a date here and I'm saying okay. Now once this is done, you can see here all the dates are now easily draggable now. Okay. Now if I want to select any number, any kind of filter here, see, this is what is how logically I'll filter the date, correct? I will not go and filter the date each and every date together. I can filter it month wise, quarter wise. So if I want to change this, I can change it to year wise also. For example, I want to see the data for only 26 and 27. So I can filter out through a timeline slicer. Okay, so this is actually called as a timeline slicer, and these are very useful interactive elements which are used for dashboarding also. Okay, I can do month wise also, which I can do from see 2025 November to 2026 February, or I can do quarter wise also. For example, I want 2025 quarter 3 to 2026 quarter 2. Okay, so whatever I perform here will automatically be filtered in this particular pivot table. Okay, so these are the advanced options in a pivot table that we always need to know. Okay, so we have actually covered the pivot table, all the basics and a little bit of advanced part in a pivot table. Okay, does anyone have any doubts, anything here? I can see somebody is asking, hi, how print full page in Excel sheet? I don't understand what you're asking. How print full page in an Excel sheet? You want to print pages in the sense that you want to literally print it with printer, or what are you asking, PP Productions? I'm not able to understand your question. So, does anyone have any other doubts in pivot tables? Any other doubts you guys have in a pivot table? You can ask me through live chat. I'll always guide you through live chat. No issues. Let me just give you one more pointer here. For example, if I want to change the data source of this particular pivot table, okay. For example, I have worked on this particular pivot table for hours together, and I want the format of the pivot table to be same, but I just want to change the data here, okay. So for example, I have another data which I can just copy paste here. I'll just copy this data and I'll paste it here, okay. Now I have another set of data over and above which I want to apply the same pivot table. So what I can do is I can just go to the pivot table analyze tab, and I can go to change data source, and I can change the data source of the pivot table, saying that if I don't want this data to be formed on the pivot table, I can go and select this particular data here, okay. So I'm just changing the data source, and for doing this what we need is, see, generally what we need for this, we will be needing the exact data here. Even if there is any small change in the name of the column or anything, the pivot table will get altered. So I'll just change the data source here, so that same pivot table now is formed on another data, okay. So now if you see, even though I did this, the pivot table has changed because the data is not exactly same. See, the formattings and certain things of the data should be exactly same. The name of the columns and all the things should be same, okay. Since it was not, since date is being recognized as number here, it is not getting it into a pivot table into that format. Now I have to change the format of this and then again create a pivot table. So what I'll do is I'll just undo this particular thing. So changing the data source is also a very useful option when you want to change the data but you don't want to change the pivot table. Okay. And over and above this, if you see here in this pivot table analyze tab, there is an option to change the pivot table name also. I can name the pivot table separately so that I can identify it while I am writing a macro also. See, macro do help us do what? They help us do automations, perform tasks for us, correct? So we can actually name the pivot table based on our requirement also. Okay. And if suppose while using a pivot table, if suppose I close this particular pivot fields here, how can I get it back? See, even though if I'm clicking on a pivot table, it is not showing again, correct? So what I can do is when I want it back, I can just go to pivot table analyze tab here, and I can click on the field list so that I can get this particular box here. So field list, this is actually called as a field list, which we can actually get it through this particular option. Over and above this, anyone has any doubts in this pivot table so that I can just solve them or I can just answer your questions? No issues. So we have covered the pivot table session fully. So I think many of you guys might be new to a pivot table concept. And if you guys want these materials, see, I have already sent you the links yesterday. I'll resend it today. These materials are very helpful, which will help you over and above my sessions. You can actually go through these materials where you'll have shortcuts, you'll have all the summaries, what a pivot table does and everything in one particular Excel sheet itself, and you can practice here itself, seeing my recordings or my YouTube sessions. Okay. So these are very, very premium uh, resources which I had yesterday itself explained. I'll explain it once again. So if you see, you'll be getting access to a drive here, which will have all these resources for you, which will help you learn Excel from basic to the very advanced level. Okay. So generally, expert manuals are PPT guides. Professional resources are Excel files, which you can practice, the files that I'm actually teaching you or training you in the live sessions. So you also can practice just by rewatching the videos or the YouTube live sessions again. And over and above which, workshops help you actually practice certain things based on the case scenarios, where certain topics are divided based on the case scenarios. You can actually practice on the live Excel files here, and over and above which, you will be getting shorter guides also. Tutorials are also there. Whoever wants to learn Excel or whoever are new to Excel can use very interactive tutorial files to actually learn Excel, learn each and every feature separately. And also there are shortcut guides which I am providing you, which are very, very useful shortcut guides for your job. Okay, always generally use shortcut guides which you can go through, you can always refer to it, and you have to actually going forward memorize it, because these shortcut guides are very useful to everyone. Okay. So yeah. Okay, guys. Thank you for today's session. Let us just meet tomorrow. Okay. Thank you. Bye. See you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow we have data analysis and data management session. So we'll be learning other tools which we can use to analyze and manage the data. So let us just meet tomorrow. Thank you guys. Thank you for today's session. Bye. See you tomorrow.